What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review The Naked Gun, starring Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson. And much to my relief and much to my joy and surprise, I get to give a favorable review to a funny movie that clocks in at less than an hour and a half. It is 85 minutes long, just like the first movie. But I can't remember the last time I sat in a theater with a crowd cracking up at a movie. And is it as good as the original Naked Gun? Of course not.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
Let me help you with that.
Or is it as great as a classic like Airplane? Not even close. However, I laughed my balls off throughout most of the movie. I mean, it runs out of steam here and there, and then it'll kind of come back, and then it more or less sticks the landing at the end. But it was hilarious, and I would say my theater was probably 2/3, 3/4 full. Most of them seem to be on the movie's wavelength. And I'm going to have to come up with a new, test or criteria for funny movies. Because usually I use the Mark Kermode 6 laugh test. If you laugh involuntarily 6 times out loud, that's a successful comedy. But this passed the 6 laugh test in a matter of minutes. But there's a different kind of a laugh that this movie presented where I would laugh upon the initial delivery of the joke. And then like 30 seconds would go by and I'd start laughing again or kind of chuckling to myself over the earlier jokes, so much so that oftentimes I found myself missing certain lines of dialogue. I'm going to actually have to see this movie for a second time just to hear all the jokes, because there's one line in here, and I don't want to give any spoilers until the very end. I'll just say there's a joke or a line involving a particular lyric from a popular song from about 20 years ago. And I was cracking up so hard, and the audience was cracking up so hard, I missed like an entire scene. So it's worth it. And this movie only cost I think $45 million to make, according to an interview I heard today with Seth MacFarlane. It doesn't need to do that well to be a successful movie. And the big question is it going to be funny enough or successful enough, or just have broad enough appeal where you'll see some other filmmakers trying to get in on the action and create some full-blown comedies. And let me be totally clear. This is not one of those comedies that 2/3 of the way through tries to get serious or sentimental or suddenly start taking the plot seriously or the romance seriously. It is wall-to-wall attempts at humor. I won't say it's wall-to-wall laughs, because some of the jokes are just ugh, that one didn't quite land. But they're at least trying to make you laugh every step of the way. There's not an earnest moment. There's not a sincere moment. There's not a message. There's nothing about this movie that is anything other than just attempts at making you crack up in your seats. And if a movie's 2/3 of the way successful in that effort, well, then what you have is a pretty goddamn good comedy. And at the end of this video, I'll put together a list of some of my favorite spoof movies, and it depends upon how broadly you want to describe a spoof movie. For me, Scary Movie or Not Another Teen Movie, those are spoof movies where they're quite literally specifically ridiculing specific movies. And then you have some other movies that are kind of just lighthearted, where periodically they might make a reference to another movie, but you're not quite sure if it's a spoof movie. In any case, we'll save that for later on. Let's stay focused here, because I knew going into this that Liam Neeson would be pretty goddamn good. I'd heard this interview with Seth MacFarlane on The Town talking to Matthew Bellany, where he said his only job as a producer, or the one note he gave, he said, you have to hire a legitimate actor to pull this off. You can't hire a comedian who's trying to make it funny, because he learned the lesson from movies like Airplane, decades ago.
Excuse me, sir, would you... Donation to the Reverend Moon? Juice for Jesus? Oh!
Read about Jehovah's Witness? How about Buddhism?
Where guys like Robert Stack or Leslie Nielsen would come in and deliver it totally deadpan, totally straight, and yet you're just howling. And that's really hard to do, because you have to make the scene silly enough where the comedy will... It's funny, when you try to break down how a joke works, you can kind of the whole joke can kind of fizzle and fall to pieces, but there's a very specific style of humor where you have deadpan actors making you laugh uproariously because of the outrageousness of the scene. And Liam Neeson totally stepped up to the plate and totally delivered. And obviously, it's a very tough act to follow if you're trying to follow in the footsteps of fucking Leslie Nielsen, who was the Hall of Fame heavyweight champion of this style of comedy. Even when he was doing the talk show circuit, he would still have people in stitches, because he would bring this little fart machine along where he would be acting totally serious, a very serious, thoughtful adult, who likes to talk about serious issues. And then he'd cross his legs and have his fart machine go off.
It's just a prop. We use it in Airplane, and I have so much fun with it, so I just carry it around with me.
Yeah, okay. That's... Leslie Nielsen, ladies and gentlemen.
Just an absolute pro. He knew what he was doing. And between Airplane and The Naked Gun, goddamn, he's got two of the best comedies ever made. To his credit, But I'm also going to recommend that people check out the show Police Squad. And Police Squad was the original show that kind of like gave birth to the idea of doing The Naked Gun in 1988. But I think there are only like 6 or 7 episodes. I discovered it as an adult, but it's absolutely fucking hysterical. But yeah, long story short, nobody will ever be able to replicate or equal what Leslie Nielsen did. It's like trying to like replicate or equal what Mel Brooks did as a director. It's just you have to kind of go off and do your own thing. But Liam Neeson, because he's got this gravelly persona that he's been kind of refining and honing over the last 10 or 15 years, doing all these kind of like mean old man action movies. I mean, starting with Taken. I mean, I don't know how much money he's made over the last 10 or 15 years just making these mean old man action movies, but it's a fucking bundle. But he's so good now, just being like, kind of like growling and snarling. He's got so much gravitas. And when you combine that with the ridiculous shit going on in this movie, yeah, it's pretty goddamn funny. But the real secret weapon with this movie, which I did not anticipate at all going into this, he and Pamela Anderson have so much goddamn chemistry it'll make your head spin. And they're now dating, so bravo to Liam Neeson. You're officially romantically involved with one of my teenage, like real heartthrobs. I entered high school in 1991 at a time where Pamela was frequently gracing the pages of Playboy, much to my delight. And then you had like the sex tapes and movies like Barbed Wire and all sorts of crazy shit over the next 10 years.
How utterly goddamn heroic.
Right at my most hormonal / sexually hungry period that I would ever experience, so Pamela Anderson looms very large in my imagination. But as a sex symbol, I had no idea that she could do comedy, like do like really good straight-faced comedy where she gets the joke. Like you can tell, like she walked onto the set and it's like, all right, I get the vibe, I get the tone, and Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson just absolutely make the magic happen. And stay tuned for the end of this video. There's one scene that I have to spoil that's so goddamn good. I can't bear the thought of not mentioning it, but I don't want to spoil it for somebody who's not yet seen it. But for anybody who's out there watching it right now, they're going to want to discuss it because it's that goddamn good. But let's just say in the middle of the movie, there's a break in the action to give us what I think is the best scene of the movie by far. So long story short, I liked it, obviously, but who is responsible for this movie, you might be asking yourself. Director Akiva Schaffer, whose work I'm largely unfamiliar with, but if you look him up on IMDb, he's got just a giant laundry list of credits as long as your arm, a lot of which is TV, like SNL and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But he's worked on some movies like The Watch and Pop Star Never Stop Poppin'. I'm going to have to go back and watch some of his earlier movies because if they're on this level, I will be thrilled. Or who knows, maybe Seth MacFarlane as the producer kind of helped get him to that special magical place to really make the comedy happen. But Akiva Schaffer co-wrote this movie with Dan Greger and Doug Mand.
Says you served 20 years for man's laughter.
You mean manslaughter?
Must have been quite the joke.
And I hope all three of these guys will go straight to work on yet another comedy because I feel like there's been such a comedy drought over like the last 10 or 15 years, and we can talk all night about what were the causes of that comedy drought. The most compelling reason I've heard from a business standpoint is that at a period where the budgets of movies were going up and the international market became increasingly important, science fiction, dinosaurs, superheroes, aliens, etc., that stuff's easy to sell internationally. Big special effects, big movie stars, etc. Comedy, less so. I mean, comedy can be incredibly specific, but as I always say, if you keep the budgets manageable and keep the budgets down, all you need to do is conquer the domestic marketplace. So, I'm shamelessly biased when it comes to this review because I'm rooting hard for The Naked Gun to make all the money in the world. But if this movie were fucking terrible and it was about as funny as like an orphanage on fire, I would tell you because I feel like when you tell your friends or your family members that a movie's funny and then it disappoints, well, then your credibility is just shattered. I feel like there's something about comedy because you can't like bullshit your way through it. Like if you're talking about an old art film or a drama or whatever, you can always come up with some total bullshittery to justify why you find the movie compelling or interesting or whatever. But with comedy, it's the most honest genre in the world. You laugh or you don't. And like, applause does not count. I'm talking about cracking up, smiling, rubbing your cheeks, the whole deal. That's a fucking comedy. You have to laugh out loud. Otherwise, it's just, it's something else. And because I was a teen and in my early 20s in the 90s when we were just getting inundated with a flood of comedies, it became almost like a shorthand for both my siblings as well as my college friends where you could spend the entire evening just quoting comedies, and that was considered a totally worthy substitute for like legit conversation and that sort of thing. Like I'm nearly 50 years old and I'm still quoting Billy Madison with my college friends and texts and that sort of thing, and they totally get it. But here's what I like about The Naked Gun. The I won't call it a remake. It's basically the 4th movie in the franchise. What I like is how it doesn't do what a lot of 90s comedies did. Like Adam Sandler and David Spade and Chris Farley and a lot of those guys, they would make really funny fucking movies, but almost always 2/3 of the way through, it would get very sad and weepy and sentimental and lame, and the jokes would just vanish for like 10 or 20 minutes. Even movies like Wedding Crashers would do the same shit, where it's like, oh my God, you actually are trying to take your ridiculous premise seriously, and that is just an absolute comedy killer. But like the original show Police Squad, as well as the 3 Naked Gun movies, this movie never tries to take it seriously ever, so it actually makes it one of the most successful franchise extensions or franchise reboots, whatever you want to call it, that I've seen like in the modern era. Like in the last 5 years, we've seen so many sci-fi shows or sci-fi movies or superhero concepts or horror concepts kind of being like dug up from the grave and like jolted back to life. Sometimes, rarely, it's successful. Most of the time, it's dreadful because the new filmmakers, like, they don't understand what makes the original franchise tick. They don't understand what made it popular. They definitely don't understand the fans of those franchises, and ultimately, they end up making an abomination that everybody's ashamed of. This movie, it can stand, like, if you have like a physical media collection and you've got Police Squad and Naked Gun 1, 2.5, and 33 1/3 all side by side, you can place this new one up there side by side. And I would argue that it's probably better than Naked Gun 2.5 and 33 1/3. But obviously, when it comes to the original movie, I think I saw it 100 times on HBO. It was one of those movies where, because it was so short and so fun and so fast, even then in middle school, my friends and I were constantly quoting it to each other. But even more importantly, at my first early middle school dances, one of the only dances that we would do where we wouldn't get embarrassed, apart from like slow songs, we would imitate the Frank Drebin umpire dance from the end of the movie, and that would kind of like be like an icebreaker where you'd like imitate that scene. That at least got people out on the dance floor. I know it sounds cheesy and ridiculous, but when you're 12, like whatever it takes to get people on the dance floor, like just like grab those excuses and run with it. Now, I've been going quite a bit, saying a lot of complimentary things about the movie, but let's slow down for a second and actually try to be critical, because if you oversell a comedy, once again, you run the risk of losing a little bit of credibility. So let me be clear. This is not top tier, divine comedy on the level of like Blazing Saddles or something like that. But if I were to point to one of the potential flaws, maybe Danny Houston is not quite as good as Pamela Anderson and Liam Neeson, but he's still pretty goddamn good. I mean, the villain in the first one was Ricardo Montalban, Khan himself. That's a very tough act to follow, and he was fantastic in that original movie. I loved him. I mean, I saw it in the theater as a little kid with my siblings and my dad, and we were just crying, howling, losing our fucking minds. It was absolutely incredible. Great theater-going experience. But I would say that Danny Houston, most of the time, he gets the job done, and the funniest line of the movie by far is delivered by Danny Houston. That's the line where I was laughing so hard I missed like an entire scene of dialogue because I couldn't compose myself. Oh my God, I spat all over the place. It's kind of a hot, sweaty night here in New York, and so I'm sweating and I'm spitting, and I'm making a total spectacle of myself. In any case, Danny Houston, he's good. He's just not on the level of Liam Neeson. Paul Walter Hauser is actually pretty goddamn good in this. He's got a few jokes toward the end of the movie, or a few gags, or a few scenes involving kids, which are just hysterical. Like, right when the movie seemed to be kind of running out of gas or slowing down, it really makes a huge comeback. And I don't know if I said this earlier or not. Stick around to the very end of the movie and then into the credits, because if you're a fan of Police Squad, you'll see a few visual nods to the great heyday from the original show. And I should also give a very warm shout out to the wonderful world of the UFC, because at the end of this movie, you have a giant UFC event. They call it, I think, WWWFC or something ridiculous like that, but Bruce Buffer is there. Kamaru Usman and Justin Gaethje are fighting each other. Michael Bisping is doing the commentary alongside John Anik. Like, there are a lot of familiar faces. If you're into MMA, if you're into the UFC, I mean, none of those guys are really like actors, like, even though they do a lot of like performing in real life when it comes to commentary, but I would say their acting is subpar. But there are a few great little moments toward the end of the movie involving all those fighters, because like the main thrust, or the main kind of like gist of this plot, is that this big tech giant is trying to unleash this like digital plague that'll make everybody try to kill each other. Basically, he's trying to turn the whole world into the big giant fight and in the baseball diamond in the original Naked Gun. So it's got a very similar ending in that respect. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are one or two spoilers I do want to acknowledge before I run out of time. So last spoiler warning, 3, 2, 1. So while there's no shortage of great comedic bits scattered throughout the movie, or ongoing gags, there were two scenes that really jumped out at me. The first one, Danny Houston, who's playing like a tech billionaire, one of the most powerful men in the world, blah, blah, blah. but he's describing this nightclub that he put together where, where powerful men with like larger than life appetites can gather away from the prying eyes of the public. And he says, and as the song goes by the great Black Eyed Peas, where we can all just get retarded. And like the way he delivered it in that kind of gravelly voice, which he inherited from his father, John Huston. I hope somewhere, may he rest in peace, that John Huston is cracking up in his grave, listening to his son deliver that line. But the scene that just murdered me, halfway through the movie, there's a romantic interlude, similar to the music video sequence in the original Naked Gun. But here, Pamela Anderson's character and Liam Neeson, they go out for a romantic rendezvous at this cabin out in the snow. And initially, there were no jokes. And I was like, oh no, is the movie going to like start fucking up? Are they gonna ruin the movie? Because it was starting to take itself seriously. And they're making a snowman and getting all romantic. And then at one point, Liam Neeson's like going through the library and he pulls out a book of spells and incantations. And they're like, and once again, it's all over during music. And they sit down and they're kind of smiling and laughing and reading from the book. And this green mist goes out. And suddenly the snowman comes to life. And initially it's really innocent, like Frosty the Snowman. But suddenly it starts turning into like a full-blown orgy between the three of them, and like Liam Neeson, like he's taking like flavoring and putting it on the arm, like biting in, like once again all totally deadpan, totally straight faced. It's absolutely hilarious. But then when Pamela Anderson and Liam Neeson go to the hot tub to continue the romantic interlude, the snowman obviously can't join in, so you see its eyebrows change, and suddenly it turns into a horror movie where the snowman's chasing him around the house. And anyway, I was like, just shy of rolling around the floor like a fucking dog, just howling with laughter. I love horror. I love sexual comedy. I love these two actors. It just combined a lot of things that I love. And so that scene, I would say the whole movie is worth the price of admission just to see that one sequence. But luckily, it's not the only great comedic bit that this movie has to offer.
Hi, Daddy. It's me, Frank Jr. Love you.
Hey, Dad. Boy, do I miss you.
But apart from a few scenes that kind of drag or a few jokes that just land with a big giant thud, on the whole, very enjoyable. And once again, when you're dealing with a movie that's an hour and 25 minutes long, I mean, the commercials and the trailers ran for almost as long as the fucking movie itself. The combination of commercials and trailers at the theaters really gotten excessive. And I know there's a lot of people coming in very late to skip all that tedious bullshit. But the good news is, for a movie like this, when you have a really short running time like that, you can play it multiple times per day, like far more times per day than if it were 2 hours and 25 minutes long. And like over the last 10 years, how many 2-hour, 25-minute snorefests have you been subjected to? And as I always say, if a movie's fantastic, you can always watch it again. It's always a good idea for a movie to exit center stage a little prematurely, leaving the audience hungry for more, as opposed to overstaying its welcome and running everything right into the ground. So I just found it to be very refreshing. So many things that I thought were kind of dead and gone made a triumphant return. Like sexual banter, sexually charged jokes. And this is a PG-13 movie. It's not like racy in any way, shape, or form. I just hope that they'll be rewarded with some proper enthusiasm from the comedy enthusiasts out there, or even better, perhaps convert some teens and 20-somethings who have basically been living in a comedy desert over the last decade, convert them into comedy junkies. But on that note, let's talk about some of the best spoof movies over the last 50 years. And obviously this list is going to change depending upon how broadly you define a spoof movie. Like Tropic Thunder. Is that a spoof movie? There are spoofs within it at the beginning, making fun of some Hollywood trends, but it's not like throughout the entire movie they're constantly making references to like Apocalypse Now or Platoon or whatever. There are some, but it's not like a spoof movie in the same way that like Scary Movie is, where they're making fun of I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream from from start to finish. But my favorite spoof movies, and some of these are defined more broadly than others, Blazing Saddles. I mean, that's one of the best comedies ever made, but it's constantly making fun of all these obscure westerns or even not so obscure westerns. And the sign of a great spoof movie is when you can enjoy the jokes, even if you have no idea what they're talking about. I laughed for years at the line in that movie about, "You do it for Randolph Scott." Like, Randolph Scott.
You do it for Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
All right, Sheriff. 24 hours.
I had no idea who Randolph Scott was. Now I do, and now I've seen a million of his movies. I love Randolph Scott. But I saw Blazing Saddles probably 20 or 30 times before I ever saw any of Randolph Scott's Westerns. But that's the sign of a great spoof where you don't need to have a frame for reference to get it. Or Young Frankenstein. I'd seen some old school horror movies, but when I first saw Young Frankenstein, I might have even seen it before I saw the original James Whale Frankenstein, but it still worked great. And obviously, as long as we're talking Mel Brooks, we got to throw in Spaceballs as well. And Spaceballs is getting a sequel in the very near future. But I've already mentioned Airplane many times over, but when you want to talk about the Comedy Hall of Fame, you got to mention Jim Abrams, David Zucker, and Jerry Zucker, the three maniacs who made that movie, along with many other movies. I mean, they made The Naked Gun, they did Top Secret, they did Basketball, they did a bunch of comedies, but obviously The Naked Gun and The Airplane and Top Secret are probably their three Hall of Fame moments in their career. But if you have a couple Hall of Fame moments in your career, that's all you need. And then they actually circled back to the Scary Movie franchise after some of the Wayans brothers kind of lost interest in that franchise. I still think the Scary Movies were at their best when it was the Wayans brothers. But speaking of the Wayans brothers, we also got them thrown into the mix. I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. Saw it a million times when I was a kid. Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2. I mean, those are full-blown spoof movies. Absolutely hilarious. Galaxy Quest is kind of a spoof movie about Star Trek, but maybe it's a little bit, maybe too earnest and too sincere at times to be a full-blown spoof movie, but it's still an absolutely fantastic comedy and one of the best Star Trek movies ever made, even if it doesn't fall under the Star Trek brand. And I already mentioned Not Another Teen Movie and Tropic Thunder, so those are probably my favorites when it comes to spoof movies. But getting back to the two young lovebirds who make this movie soar, Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson, what are their best movies? I mean, Liam Neeson's been making so many good movies over the last 40 years. I mean, going from Excalibur.
You dare accuse the Queen, Gawain? I do!
Up through like Husbands and Wives by Woody Allen to Schindler's List to basically, or freaking Batman Begins. I mean, he's got a ton of good ones to his name. And with Pamela Anderson, it's funny. I was never a big Baywatch fanatic back in the day. I wasn't watching a lot of TV in the early 90s. I did see the Tommy Lee Scandalous cassette that was floating around, and I also saw the tape she made with Bret Michaels. And I was always like, why are people talking about Tommy Lee? Like the Bret Michaels tape is far more scandalous. And then of course you've got like her full-blown like action movies like Barbed Wire and that sort of thing. But I just love seeing two salty old veterans who I've been watching basically my entire life making a fantastic movie, a very entertaining movie, a movie that delivers, that doesn't try to be more than what it actually is. It's not pretentious in any way, shape, or form. It's not self-important in any way, shape, or form. It's not taking itself too seriously. It just wants to give people a good time with the movie. So there it is. I keep saying I'm trying to like not oversell it, but I feel like I've been doing nothing but overselling it every step of the way. I can guarantee if you have a sense of humor, you will giggle at a minimum while watching The Naked Gun. So I won't say go out and support it, because if entertainment is great, it doesn't need to be supported. Like people will eagerly and hungrily throw down their money for the experience, but consider exposing yourself to the latest movie in the Naked Gun franchise, and I think you'll be delighted. But let me know what you think. What are your favorite spoof comedies, just comedies in general? I mean, I feel like comedy is one of those genres where it's got like all these little like subcategories, like, you know, teen sex comedies or raunchy sex comedies or, you know, like political satires. Like it's just got, there's so many different like ways to tackle the comedy genre. Spoof movies are just one way of doing so, but the genre's been gone for so long. I welcome its return. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. Hope everybody has a great weekend at the movies, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.